Great, thanks for that. And a further question that I have is to do with the crucifixion or non-crucifixion. So a viewer has left a comment. It's a very long comment, but what he's claiming is that early Christian or heretical Christian writers also agree with the Islamic standpoint of a non-crucifixion. So I wonder if you could shed some light on that, what you know of that, and any counter arguments that you may have against this notion that if there were a number of early Christian believers in Christ who denied the crucifixion, I mean, where does that leave us all?
Okay, let's deal with that one real quickly. There is truth to the fact that there were a lot of other beliefs that were coming out, especially in the 2nd century, concerning Christ's crucifixion. Interestingly, they only come out in the 2nd century. Basilides, or however you want to pronounce his names, he is probably the most famous, and he was very clear. He was part of this Gnostic view that confronted the idea that God would ever come on to take on bodily form, any type of human form, because that would pollute him, that flesh is corruptible. And so there is a strong view that was pervasive at that time that did not accept that. Now, that is where Muslims are pointing to. They're pointing to him. And one of the things about that he said is that Simon of Cyrene, another, took his place. But remember, no church father and no authoritative person within the church ever listened to Basilides and never accepted it. They always went back to the 4 Gospels. All 4 Gospels are very clear that was Christ on the cross. What's more, look at all the pagan authorities that support the crucifixion. You can let me just list a few right off the top of my head. You have Tacitus, who was a historian, Roman historian, had nothing good to say about Christians. Saw them as a scourge, saw that their practices were hated because they did not worship Rome. They did not worship the emperor. And anybody who did not worship the emperor, according to Tacitus, was to be seen as well, in his case, they were seen nothing more than worms. So you can see he had nothing good to say about Christianity, or certainly nothing good to say about Christian, but it is he that says that this man, Jesus, whom they worship, that they were as their leader, who died during the time of Pontius Pilate under Tiberius. We know when Tiberius was ruling. We know when Pontius Pilate was there in Jerusalem, and that would have been 33 AD. And that's why we know the date. That's how we get the date so specific, because of Tacitus. So he certainly believed that Christ did die. Josephus is probably the more famous. Josephus is a Jewish historian writing at the end of the 1st century, beginning of the 2nd century. He's in Rome. And he talks about the death of Jesus. He mentions it by Jesus by name, and even says, curiously, that the Christians believe he rose from the dead. That's the only non-Christian reference we have to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There's others. We do have also Lucian of Samosata, who referred to Jesus by name, referred to the crucifixion. You have also you have Thaleson and Phlegon. Thales and Phlegon, they're Greek historians, and they were having a debate in 52 AD. Look at the date, 52 AD. Christ died in 33 AD. So you're talking within 20 years of Christ's death. These 2 Greek historians who were not Christians, they had nothing, there would be no agenda, no reason to support it. They were debating the death of Jesus Christ, and they were the ones that were saying that on the day Jesus died, the earth shook and the sun went dark, which supports the Matthew account. Now there you can I'm just giving you 4 references. 1 Jew, 1 Greek, 1 Roman, 2 Roman. Of all people, why would they support the crucifixion of Jesus Christ unless it really happened? And then why is it the Muslims can only find Basilides, and then they call him a Muslim? I mean, if you're going to call him a Muslim, as you said, Kay, you said to me earlier that there are an awful lot of things that Basilides said that go completely diametrically against Islam. So first of all, don't call him a Muslim. And if you're going to use him to have support for the fact that Christ didn't die, look and see what his agenda was. Look and see that he was not well known. Look and see why the early church refused to accept him, because he not only didn't believe in the early church precepts, he had no belief that God could be on earth, and certainly he did not believe that Jesus was God. All of those would have thrown him out of any orthodox view of Christianity. So please don't use him, to say nothing of the fact that he's talking in the mid to late 6th century. So he's over 100 years later. He was never there. John was there at the foot of the cross. I'll go with John.
Yeah. I would also just add that for any early believers who didn't believe that God could enter time and space, to then deny the crucifixion on the back of that argument implies to me that they accepted whether or not they held it themselves, but that the fact that Jesus Christ was seen as God, because therefore, how can God die? If you argue against God cannot die and also deny the crucifixion, you're at least entering into the realms of accepting that at least a lot of other people believe that. So, you know, I'm often told, you know, and asked the same old question, where did Jesus say I'm God? Apart from all the biblical references, other people recognize that at least the early Christians felt that to be true and were willing to be martyred and tormented and punished and ultimately killed for that belief.
And not only
So,
did the early Christians know that, the Jews knew that, because take a look at the Jews' reaction whenever Jesus claimed to be God. There in the Sanhedrin, in front of Caiaphas, when he claimed to be God, when he claimed 3 divine names. He claimed to be the Messiah, he claimed to be the Son of God, and then he added a third one, the Son of Man, from Daniel 7, verse 14. And when Caiaphas heard that, he tore his robe. You don't tear your robe as a priest. You are not, as a priest, you are not permitted to tear your robe unless someone has blasphemed. And there in the temple, there in John chapter 8, verse 58, when the Jews were there listening to him and they questioned him, why is it you are a man not even 50 years old and you'd say you knew Abraham, and Jesus says before Abraham was Yahweh. And when he used that word for himself, claimed it for himself, look at the reaction of the Jews. So the Jews knew that he was claiming to be God. That's one reason, the main reason that he was crucified. And Caiaphas says that when he turned towards the Sanhedrin, he said, what further proof do we need? This man has blasphemed. That's why he was crucified, because he claimed to be God. The Jews knew he was claiming to be God. The Christians knew he was claiming to be God. Muslims better learn and realize that he's claiming to be God.
The one problem I'd see for those Jews is that for a man to claim to be God is blasphemy, but for God himself to claim to be God is just the truth, and Jesus Christ is the truth. So,
that's right. Come on home.
All right. Thanks very much, Jay.
Good to hear you again. If there's any more questions, throw them at me, and we'll get on.
I will see you soon.
All right. God bless you. Bye bye. Keep safe and keep home.
You too.